In our last video, we talked about something called law of demand, which told us that if price decreases, quantity demanded increases and vice versa. And the effect of price change was shown by a movement along the same demand curve. On the other hand, we also said that not only price, but also lots of other things, such as income, expectations, etc., can affect buyers' behavior too. And the effect of those non-price factors has to be depicted in a graph by shifting the entire demand curve. So that's a really important thing to remember, the distinction between the effect of price versus effect of non-price factors on demand. So let's just quickly recap that. We learned that to show the effect of price on the quantity demanded, we will just move along the curve. If price decreases from a high value to, let's say, a very low value, then quantity demanded will increase from a low value to a very high value. Here's an example. Let's say Netflix reduces monthly subscription fee from $10 per month to $1 per month. We know for sure that other things unchanged, more people will subscribe to Netflix, and that can be shown just by moving along the same demand curve. On the other hand, we saw that if any non-price factor, such as people's income, people's job security, people's taste, etc., they can also affect demand, but we will have to show that effect by shifting the entire demand curve. To show an increase in demand due to a non-price factor, we'll have to shift the demand curve to the right. We'll take a demand curve and we'll just shift it to the right. On the other hand, if any non-price factor is causing demand to decrease, we will take a demand curve and shift it to the left. That should make sense because we're measuring quantity on the horizontal axis. And on the horizontal axis, as we go from left to right, quantity is increasing. So to show increase, we'll shift the demand curve to the right, and vice versa. If you have mastered this part, you can skip the next slide. If you haven't, if you still have a little bit of confusion, please stay with me on the next slide too. In this slide, we're going to do a final review of our understanding of when we have movement along the demand curve versus when we have to shift the demand curve. We said the law of demand told us that other things unchanged, a change in price would cause quantity demanded to change in opposite direction. For example, let's say in this particular graph, when price is $120 per unit, let's say this is a market for something like a particular cell phone or Xbox. Suppose when price is 120, the amount buyers would like to buy is 300 units. So the point that coordinates 120 price to 300 units demanded, let's call it point A. On the other hand, we also know that other things unchanged. If price was cheaper, then more than 300 would be demanded. Let's say price went down from 120 to 90, then about 500 units would be demanded. The point that coordinates this lower price to this higher quantity demanded 500, let's call that point B. Now, if we just connected point A and point B, we would get a demand curve. And notice that between point A and point B, we have price decreasing and therefore quantity increasing. That's law of demand. And if I connected point A and B, that would be a demand curve. So the effect of price is shown by when price increases, we have quantity demanded. I'm just denoting quantity demanded with the QD decreases, and vice versa. When price decreases, quantity demanded increases. That's it. However, after we have learned that a change in price would cause a movement along the demand curve, now if we ask ourselves, well, what if anything other than price changes and affects the demand? How would we show that in a graph? The answer is we'll just have to shift the curve. For example, let's say a non-price factor is people's income, potential buyers' income, and if that income increases for most of the potential buyers, we know that many of them would like to buy more. Or if new income is created for poorer people, they will become potential buyers. So at 120, if I had bigger income for people, then we would have a bigger demand. The demand would be something bigger than this 300 units. So let's say 400 units. Similarly, at price 90, whatever demand we are having in the current demand curve, at a higher price, we would have a bigger quantity demanded. Let's say instead of 500, 600 would be demanded. So now these bigger quantities at any given price is coordinated by these red dots. And if I connect these two red dots, what I get is a shifted version of the demand curve. So in this case, we had an increase in demand. Now let's take a look at a list of non-price factors that can increase demand. Well, we already mentioned if potential buyers' income increase, then we might have more demand for this good at any given price. If we have more people, let's say due to a sudden influx of a lot of immigrants, more immigrants will need more products, so demand will increase. Price of related goods can also increase demand. For example, if we are thinking of demand for cars, then whenever gasoline price decreases drastically, we know that some more people might want to buy cars because now maintaining and driving a car is cheaper due to lower fuel cost. So in this way, gasoline is a related good that can affect, whose price can affect demand for cars. Notice that this price is not car's price. This is the gasoline's price, which affects the demand for cars. Consumers' preference, consumers' taste, consumers' fashion sense, what kind of music consumers like, those things change over time from one generation to another, one era to another, and therefore demand curve keeps on changing for a particular genre of products or art, etc. Expectation is a very, very important and strong variable that can affect demand. What do we expect about our future job security, future income, future location? All those things can affect what we want to buy today. So for example, if a large number of Canadians expect that within next 3 or 4 years, price of houses will increase drastically, then a lot of people will want to buy a house right now before the price increase. So later on, we'll see lots of examples where expectation about future plays a lot of role in terms of how people behave today. So now, if any of these factors is moving in opposite direction, that will cause people to buy less or demand less of a product, and we'll have a leftward shift in the demand curve. Now let's move on to discussing behavior of supply. Just opposite to the demand or buyer's behavior, the behavior of supply or sellers is such that other things unchanged. When price of their product increases, suppliers want to sell more. And that makes sense. If cost of doing business is unchanged, if everything else is unchanged, but all of a sudden, whatever I am producing is commanding more price, then I am encouraged to produce more of it because now I can make even more money per unit. Not only the existing producers, but also lots of new entrepreneurs realize that other things unchanged, if price has gone up of a product, that product must be more profitable. So new entrepreneurs open up their own firms to produce more. So in this way, we have more quantity supplied. So law of supply says that if price increases, if price of certain product increases from, let's say, one value to another, let's say from $2 to $5, other things unchanged, sellers will want to produce and sell more. Let's say initial quantity at low price was 10 million units. When price is higher, more entrepreneurs start the business, and existing entrepreneurs or business owners also start producing more. So we have more quantity produced. So this is law of demand, law of supply, sorry. On the other hand, any non-price factor sometimes affect the supplier's behavior, but we'll have to show that behavior by shifting the supply curve. So for example, if any non-price factor increases supply, we'll show that in a graph by shifting the supply curve to the right, because quantity is measured on the horizontal axis. And to show increase, we'll have to shift the curve to the right. Oppositely, if any non-price factor causes supply to decrease, in a graph, we'll just shift the supply curve to the left to depict that. Let's do a quick recap. Imagine that currently price of a certain product is $90 and not a lot of units are being supplied. Sellers are supplying 200 units and point A is coordinating this low price with this low quantity. Other things unchanged, which means mostly cost of business unchanged. What if price of this product increases? For example, what if cost of labor decreases? Or what if cost of raw material or energy decreases? Or what if tax decreases? Tax is also a cost of doing business. That will encourage the entrepreneurs because they now know that, well, now if we produce more, we have to spend less on these costs, which means we'll get to keep more in our pockets as profit. So that causes increase in production. So at higher price, we'll have bigger than 200 as the quantity sellers would want to sell. Let's say they would like to sell 400 and point B is coordinating 120 price and 400 units that sellers want to sell. So now if I connect point A and B, what I get is a supply curve portraying law of supply, which means higher price, bigger quantity. That's it. So movement along the supply curve shows the effect of price. Now, what would happen if some non-price factor affects sellers' behavior? For example, what if the cost of labor decreases, let's say due to a decrease in wages? Or what if cost of raw materials decrease? Or what if the government tells all these sellers that, you know what, I'm going to reduce your business taxes. So in any possible way, if cost of doing business decreases, sellers are encouraged. Remember, we learned in chapter 1 that every rational entity compares costs and benefits before doing something. So in this case, if you put yourself in the shoes of a seller or producer, your cost of producing something is the cost of labor, cost of raw materials, taxes, rents, energy costs, so on and so forth. And your benefit is whatever revenue you earn by selling your product. Per unit, you earn the price. So now, if those costs of doing businesses are decreasing, that means you will do more of it. So if those factors are non-price, such as wages, electricity bills, taxes, rents, raw material costs, if any of those decrease, sellers will sell more. But we have to show that by shifting the entire supply curve to the right. Why? Because at any given price, sellers would have supplied more if the cost of doing business was smaller. Take any other price, 120. Sellers would supply more if cost of doing business was cheaper. So if we plot these new coordinate points, we get a shifted version of supply curve. So logics are really similar to how the demand curve shifts here, but it's just the opposite. In demand's case, at higher prices, buyers were buying less. In the supply's case, at higher prices, sellers want to sell more. That's it. So now let's look at a list of possible non-price factors that can affect supply. So we are going to talk about what can increase supply. If cost of labor wages decrease, by the way, decrease is shown by this downward sloping arrow, and increase will be shown by denoted by this upward sloping arrow. If cost of labor decreases or cost of raw materials or machineries, equipment, structure, they decrease, sellers are encouraged. Technological advancement simply means as a seller, as a producer, you can produce more by using less inputs, less resources. So technological advancement means basically a cost reduction. So that would cause supply to increase. If government gives subsidy to sellers, for example, Canadian government gives, occasionally it gives a lot of subsidies to agricultural producers, milk producers, dairy producers. And those are to encourage these producers to produce more. So if more subsidy is given, supply will increase. Expected future price. If suppliers or producers expect that maybe 6 months down the line or 1 year down the line, the product price will decrease, then today they will want to sell as fast as possible before the price actually decreases. So supply today will increase. Number of producer, well, that's quite simple. If we have more farms, then together they will produce bigger quantity. So all those things will cause supply to increase. We'll show that by shifting the supply curve to the right. Oppositely, if any of these factors moved in opposite direction, we would have a leftward shift in the supply curve. Now we have learned the behavior of the demand side and supply side of the market. And now we'll use these two concepts and draw both demand and supply curve on the same diagram to answer a fundamental question. The question is, where do prices come from? How does a market determine what the price should be or will be without any dictation from any government or lawmakers? Markets determine prices automatically by the forces of supply and demand. We'll see that in our next video.